Hey, welcome back. We left off at the end of the previous lesson with a challenge for you to try to find the various points in the code that require you to make modifications to protect against the XML injection. In this lesson, I will show you the process I used to do that. After this lesson, you should be able to navigate a large code base to find critical segments of the code and patch vulnerabilities within the confines of the code. Let's get to it.
So I was able to track it down to 2 entry points. The very first entry point for lesson 3 is the simple XXE.java class. And the second one for the second lesson, or 4, which tests the REST framework, is the content type assignment, both of which call the parse XML method inside the comments class. And that's where we can employ our modifications to the code, at least some of them. There's more defense and depth that we can employ. So the very first part is this. So if we go to their recommendation page, it talks about XML factory, support for DTD to be turned off if you don't need it. The use cases for both 3 and 4 certainly show us that we don't need it. So we're going to turn off support for that. And I'm going to move this one up. Now the question becomes, do we support external entities? Or do we support validating? I mean, without DTD, there is no external entity. So technically we don't need those 2 lines of code. And obviously, we can always reference our handy OWASP cheat sheet for these types of information. Now, we went ahead and disabled DTD. However, there may be times that you're not able to completely disable it. And from there, you have to specifically configure your XML input factory to only parse the types of documents and the types of header information and entities that you want it to parse. And you could get very detailed with it. You could enable and disable certain types of features and make it very custom to your use case. But the idea behind this is you want the parser to have the least amount of features enabled in order to work for you. So we'll go ahead and leave those off. And if you're not sure exactly what these do, you can look into the documentation for it. So in my IDE, I can just simply click the properties, turn off and implementing specific validation. Since we're not doing any specific validation, I'm just going to remove that line of code. Support external entities. The property is required for the parser to resolve external parse entities. But since we have DTDs disabled, we don't need that feature turned on. So I'll go ahead and comment out these 2. And we'll go ahead and recompile. Close that extra page. I'm going to reset the lesson plan here after this loads. Perfect. I'm going to refresh and reset the lesson plan. So the idea here is I'm going to send a test just to get it in my burp proxy. Go to my proxy, find the most recent post, send it to our repeater. And inside the repeater, I can just borrow the code that I have already written to do this for me and just even see if this works. Hit go. And we get back a lesson failed, but sorry, the solution is not correct. Please try again. Now, we know this used to work. There's also another one we want to try, which was the ... And we'll see if that one works. Same issue. Now, if we go back to the web page and refresh the output, nothing was committed to these. And we know this used to work, so clearly we've disabled this route. Now, the second question asks us if we can do it through REST. So I'm going to do a REST test. Go back to our proxy, grab the most recent post, send it to the repeater. And this is the one that we were able to change to XML before. And we were able to submit this text. In fact, we can go back to the previous versions we ran, which are up here. So like number 2, which worked, or number 1, and copy those. Obviously, this is the same one that we tried before and it worked. So application XML with that payload, send that through. And again, the XML parser fails to parse that because entities are disabled. Now, clearly these are getting called because I have my print lines in the right place. So this is not working, but we can actually add another layer of protection against our second instance because it's only supposed to accept JSON data types. So if we go to the content type assignment and the create user call, which is what's getting called under call to, is actually has a request mapping, and this is a Spring thing to the framework provides these types of annotations that says accepts methods of type post, it consumes media of all type, it produces media of the JSON value type. So we want to strictly say we also want to only consume application JSON value type. So if you actually start typing, you'll see the different options available. We're going to use a JSON type, and I'm going to recompile this. The idea here is we're not going to rely on the implementations of our parser to protect us here. We could actually have our framework not even pass the data to the parser to begin with if it's not presented to us in the shape or the type that we expect. So going back to our browser, I'm going to refresh just to get a new session in case that one died. And module 4 or section 4 of this, I'm going to do another REST test. Going back to our proxy, grabbing the last post, sending it to our trusted repeater, and I'm going to change this to XML and borrow the same payload that we used the last few times and send it. Now you notice we actually got a very different error message. Previously, we were getting errors that look like this, and what they were showing is the XML parser wasn't able to parse what we had sent it. In the new one, we're actually getting a different error, and it's saying this application has no expected mapping for error. So like WebGoat wasn't set up to provide a proper error page. But the content type is not something that it expected. So it did not expect XML, so it's not even entering the function. Notice that getting called was called the first time that I did my REST test to get a new session in my proxy, but it was not called the second time when I actually sent my payload. So you want to always layer your defenses. You never know where a developer might accidentally enable some of these things back for certain use cases. And for the classes that you control, for the modules that you control, you can at least have some certainty that the data type is coming in the shape that you expect, and you limit your exposure. This type of defense also helps you protect maybe currently unknown vulnerabilities that could exist in this XML parser from being leveraged. Maybe limiting the input type to JSON types limits buffer overflows or heap overflows, or some implementation failure outside of your code base cannot be exercised simply because the data type that you're inputting doesn't have the proper structure to take advantage of that vulnerability. So getting your code to always provide the minimal set of features that you expect it to be working on is always advised.